In one of his most shocking readings from the early 1930s, Edgar Cayce described something few Americans at the time could even imagine: that the very consciousness of Christ was not just a distant theological idea, but a living force that could completely reshape a human life. He explained that Christ consciousness was not about belonging to a denomination, nor about memorizing scriptures mechanically, but about awakening the deepest level of the soul to align with the infinite presence of God. This was revealed during the Great Depression, when despair and hunger clouded the nation. Families came to Virginia Beach in desperation, and Cayce, in trance, spoke words that gave hope. He revealed that to truly heal, people had to open themselves to this consciousness, allowing it to transform not only their bodies but their relationships, their decisions, and even the trajectory of their future. And here is what no one expected. Many who followed his guidance documented real, lasting transformations, despite the darkness of the times. During a session that changed the life of an entire family, Cayce emphasized that Christ consciousness is not limited to Jesus as a historical figure, but is the same divine spark available within every soul. This was not blasphemy, nor was it an attempt to diminish Jesus, but a way to explain that the Christ spirit that lived in him is the eternal model we are meant to awaken within ourselves. Imagine hearing this in a small living room in Hopkinsville, Kentucky, when most people were simply struggling to survive. It must have sounded radical, almost unbelievable. Yet it was spoken with such conviction that the people present wept, because deep down they recognized it as truth. What Cayce said went against the logic of a society dominated by fear and material struggle. He insisted that aligning with Christ consciousness was the only true way to heal, not only from disease, but from bitterness, envy, and despair. But here's what no one expected. Cayce's words would resonate not just with the poor, but also with doctors, ministers, and skeptics who visited him out of curiosity. Some came mocking, others came doubtful, but many left stunned. One physician from New York, who had dismissed Cayce as a fraud, admitted after a reading that he could not explain how this simple man, in a sleep-like state, described the true origin of his chronic illness, and offered a path of healing that no medical book contained. What shook him the most was not just the accuracy of the diagnosis, but the way Cayce insisted that the healing could only last if the man cultivated love, forgiveness, and an awareness of Christ within him. Without that, Cayce said, the cure is temporary. Those words lingered. Decades later, testimonies preserved in the ARE archives confirmed that lives were changed not just physically, but spiritually, with families reconciled and hopeless individuals reborn into purpose. Cayce never claimed these insights were his own. He always pointed back to a source greater than himself. When asked directly where this knowledge came from, he often said it was drawn from the same universal record available to all souls, the Akashic records. But he clarified that the power to apply it in life depended on Christ consciousness. Without that key, knowledge remained dry, lifeless, and even dangerous. In this way, he gave the American people of his generation a revolutionary teaching: that spiritual power was not a privilege for priests, nor a mystery locked in the Bible's pages, but an active force that any human being could access by choosing to live as Jesus lived, in compassion, forgiveness, and unity with God. This message, while timeless, was especially piercing during the years of war, when hatred and division threatened to consume the world. Cayce's voice was one of radical hope, calling people back to the inner Christ as the anchor for peace, resilience, and true transformation. Imagine the setting: Virginia Beach, during the height of World War II. Families torn apart by loss, soldiers returning home broken in body and spirit, mothers praying for their sons at the front. It was in this atmosphere of uncertainty that Cayce repeated a message he had given years earlier: that Christ consciousness was the only light strong enough to withstand the shadows of the age. During one of his most impactful readings, he described it as a living vibration, a frequency that could shift the mind and heal the body. He warned that without cultivating this state, humanity would remain trapped in cycles of fear and destruction. Those who listened carefully understood he was not offering abstract philosophy, but a practical path. He gave instructions as simple as daily prayer, meditation on the life of Christ, and acts of kindness carried out in secret. These practices, he said, would gradually tune the soul to the Christ vibration, allowing divine energy to flow into daily life. What happened next was extraordinary. Testimonies from people who tried this approach were preserved in the ARE archives. One account tells of a woman who had battled depression for years, whose doctors had given up hope. After hearing Cayce's words, she began practicing forgiveness toward family members she had not spoken to in decades. Slowly, her health improved. But more importantly, her sense of purpose returned. Another record describes a veteran haunted by nightmares, unable to find peace. Cayce told him that his healing required more than medicine. It required opening his heart to the light of Christ within him. Weeks later, his wife wrote to the ARE, saying that the nightmares had ceased after he started daily prayer and service to others in his community. These stories reveal something Cayce insisted on again and again. Healing is never just physical. It is the soul aligning with its true source, the Christ force, that brings lasting transformation. Skeptics often challenged him, arguing that such claims were unscientific. And yet, here is what made Cayce's words so hard to dismiss. The results. People were getting better. Families were reconciling. Lives once lost to despair were finding new meaning. Even ministers who initially condemned Cayce for stepping outside traditional theology found themselves confronted with undeniable evidence. Some returned quietly, admitting that what Cayce called Christ consciousness was simply a deeper understanding of what Jesus had always taught. Love one another. Forgive 70 times 7. The kingdom of God is within you. Cayce's gift was to show that these were not metaphors, but living keys to transformation. And he did it with a humility that disarmed even his critics. He always said, "I am but a channel." His insistence on pointing back to God, never to himself, is part of why so many who encountered his work trusted the message, even when it shook their understanding of religion. There is a profound lesson here for us today. In an era defined by materialism, distraction and disconnection, the invitation Cayce delivered is as urgent as it was during the Great Depression or the years of war. He warned that societies built only on external power would collapse, but individuals and nations that embraced Christ consciousness would thrive, not just spiritually, but in health, creativity, and resilience. This is more than inspiration. It is a call to action. Because awakening Christ consciousness means living differently. Choosing love where there is hate, forgiveness where there is resentment, unity where there is division. And here is the part most people overlook. Cayce never said this path would be easy. He often reminded his listeners that Jesus himself walked through suffering, rejection, and even death to show the way. Yet he emphasized that the resurrection was not just a historical event, but a pattern for every soul. By aligning with Christ consciousness, we too can rise from the tombs of fear, addiction, anger, and despair into a new life of freedom and light. In one of his most remembered readings, Cayce explained that Christ consciousness is not simply about belief, but about vibration. He described it as a frequency of love so pure that it reorganizes the very cells of the body and reprograms the patterns of the mind. He insisted that anyone could tap into it, not just saints or prophets, because it is the true nature of every soul. During the Great Depression, this message felt almost impossible for many to accept. People were hungry, jobs were scarce, and fear of the future dominated conversations around every dinner table. And yet, Cayce told them that aligning with Christ within would open unexpected doors, bringing not only inner peace but also practical solutions to life's struggles. There are archived testimonies of people who found work, reconciled with estranged loved ones, and even overcame chronic illness after following this path. The most striking detail was how often these breakthroughs came only after acts of forgiveness, prayer, and service. Exactly what Cayce described as the fruits of Christ consciousness. One particularly moving story recorded in the archives tells of a man from Ohio who had lost everything during the economic collapse. He came to Virginia Beach desperate and hopeless. During his reading, Cayce told him that no financial recovery would last until he forgave his brother, with whom he had quarreled years earlier over family inheritance. At first, the man resisted. Forgiveness seemed irrelevant to his empty pockets. But finally, he humbled himself, reached out, and reconciled. Within months, doors began to open. A friend offered him work, and soon he was rebuilding his life. The man later wrote to the ARE, and saying the real miracle was not his new job, but the peace he felt in his heart. This illustrates Cayce's radical truth. Material change flows from spiritual alignment. Without the Christ pattern awakened, success remains fragile. With it, transformation becomes lasting. Cayce also warned of the dangers of ignoring this inner alignment. He spoke of individuals who sought only physical cures or financial gain without changing their hearts. In such cases, he said, healing was temporary. He even described instances where people were cured of illness only to relapse months later because they returned to bitterness, greed, or resentment. Until the soul itself is healed, Cayce said, the body cannot remain whole. These words shocked many, because they revealed that the root of suffering is often spiritual disconnection. But for those willing to listen, they were an invitation into a new way of living. A way centered not in fear, but in divine love. And this is where Cayce's vision of Christ consciousness becomes revolutionary. It is not just about personal healing, but about reshaping entire communities, even nations. He believed that if enough individuals awakened to this consciousness, wars would end, poverty would diminish, and humanity would enter a new era of peace. This raises a question that continues to echo today. What if Cayce was right? What if the real solution to the crises of our time is not another policy, not another invention, not another external fix, but a radical shift in inner awareness? He foresaw that humanity would reach a breaking point, where material progress would no longer satisfy the soul. He warned that technology without spiritual grounding would lead to chaos, and knowledge without love would destroy rather than heal. These words, spoken decades ago, feel almost prophetic in today's world of constant distraction, division, and anxiety. Yet, just as in the 1930s and 40s, his invitation remains the same. Awaken Christ within. Allow that consciousness to guide decisions, relationships, and even the way we see ourselves. Because once this inner shift occurs, everything outside begins to change as well. During a session in the early 1940s, Cayce delivered a message that still shakes those who study his words today. He said that Christ consciousness is the bridge between the human and the divine, and that unless humanity learns to walk this bridge, the future will be marked by suffering, war, and disintegration. Yet he also promised that those who choose this path will experience transformation beyond anything the world can offer. He did not mean an easy life or the absence of challenges, but an inner strength, a peace that cannot be broken by external storms. Imagine being in that room in Virginia Beach, hearing those words while the world was at war. The people gathered there, soldiers' families, ministers, physicians, skeptics, were desperate for hope. And Cayce, speaking from trance, gave them not only comfort, but a roadmap. Live daily in Christ consciousness, and you will bring light where darkness seeks to reign. What made this message so powerful was its practicality. Cayce never left his audience with vague ideals. He described specific practices that anyone could apply. Prayer each morning and night, not as empty repetition but as a living connection with God. Meditation, focusing the mind on the Spirit of Christ within, opening the heart to receive guidance. Acts of service, performed quietly without expectation of recognition, because serving others attunes the soul to divine love. Forgiveness, offered even when undeserved, because holding resentment blocks the flow of healing energy. These were not abstract ideas, but disciplines that, when practiced, altered the very vibration of the person. Those who tried them consistently reported not just emotional relief, but measurable changes in health, relationships, and even finances. The Christ pattern, as Cayce called it, produced fruit that no skeptic could easily dismiss. One extraordinary account preserved in the ARE archives tells of a minister who came to Cayce as a critic, determined to prove him wrong. He believed Cayce's teachings blurred the line between faith and mysticism. But after hearing Cayce explain that Christ consciousness is the living presence of God within every soul, the minister was shaken. In his own testimony, he confessed that what moved him most was not the philosophy, but the way Cayce spoke of Jesus with such reverence. He realized that far from diminishing Christ, Cayce was magnifying him, showing that his life was not meant to be admired from afar, but lived within. The minister left transformed, and in later years became one of the voices who defended Cayce's work, insisting that it deepened, not undermined, the gospel message. This is the kind of reversal that gave credibility to Cayce's mission. His readings did not weaken faith, they ignited it. There is a striking pattern that emerges when we look at the hundreds of cases where Christ consciousness became the central message. Whether it was a farmer in Kentucky, a mother in Virginia, or a doctor from New York, the outcome was often the same. When they aligned with this higher awareness, fear lost its grip, healing accelerated, and life regained meaning. Cayce explained this with simple clarity. The Spirit of Christ is the pattern for every soul. To reject it is to reject your own destiny. To accept it is to live as you were created to live. These words echo like a prophecy, reminding us that the invitation is universal. No matter your background, your failures, or your doubts, the door is open. The Christ within you is waiting to be awakened, and once awakened, it transforms everything. And here is the most stunning truth Cayce emphasized. This transformation is not reserved for a future heaven, but begins here and now, in this very life, in every choice you make. As the war years gave way to the uncertain peace of the late 1940s, Cayce's message became even more urgent. He foresaw that material prosperity without spiritual grounding would lead humanity into confusion and emptiness. He explained that Christ consciousness was not a mystical escape, but the only true foundation for a meaningful life. Without the Spirit of Christ within, he said in one of his readings, success will turn to ashes, and power will bring only division. These words carried weight, because they came at a time when America was rebuilding, filled with optimism, yet also haunted by trauma. Families who had survived loss, soldiers who had seen horrors overseas, and children growing up in a world of rapid change all needed more than comfort. They needed direction. Cayce pointed them toward the Christ pattern as the answer, insisting that only by aligning with love, forgiveness, and divine purpose could individuals and nations thrive. One remarkable case documented in the archives tells of a businessman from New York who came to Cayce during this period. Outwardly successful, he was inwardly broken, plagued by anxiety, strained relationships, and a restless spirit that no amount of money could calm. In trance, Cayce told him that his healing would not come from wealth or status, but from surrendering to the Christ within. At first, the man resisted. He had built his identity on achievement. But over time, as he practiced meditation and acts of service, something shifted. Years later, he wrote to the ARE, describing how his priorities had changed completely. He no longer measured life by profit margins, but by the love he gave and received. His business continued, but it became a tool for service rather than self-glory. His testimony was clear. Christ consciousness had saved him from the prison of his own ego. This theme repeats again and again across Cayce's readings. The Christ pattern is not a doctrine to memorize, but a life to embody. It is about living in such harmony with God that every thought, word, and action carries healing power. Cayce even linked this state to the health of the physical body. He explained that resentment, fear, and selfishness create destructive vibrations that weaken the immune system and invite disease. Conversely, love, forgiveness, and compassion create harmony in the cells, opening the body to healing energy. Modern science may still struggle to measure these realities, but the evidence Cayce left behind is undeniable. People who awakened Christ consciousness often experienced profound changes in both health and spirit. It was not magic, but alignment. The soul returning to its natural state in God. And perhaps the most challenging part of Cayce's message is that this transformation is not optional for humanity. He warned that civilization itself depends on it. Without awakening the Christ within, nations will continue to repeat cycles of war, greed, and division. With it, humanity could enter a new era of peace and cooperation. This was not just philosophy, it was a prophecy. He envisioned a time when more and more individuals would recognize their true nature, and through that awakening, the world would shift. The Spirit of Christ, Cayce said, is the hope of the world. Those words were not meant to flatter or inspire temporarily. They were meant as a wake-up call, a reminder that the future of humanity hinges on whether we accept or reject this invitation. And today, decades later, his words feel more relevant than ever. As Cayce's life drew to a close in 1945, weakened by years of giving readings that drained his body, he remained steadfast in one conviction: that his mission had always been to point humanity back to the Christ within. He told those closest to him that all of his thousands of readings, whether about health, prophecy, or past lives, were secondary to this central truth. If you would be whole, he said, if you would be free, awaken the Christ consciousness within you. These words, spoken near the end of his life in Virginia Beach, still echo like a final testament. And what makes them so powerful is that they were not theories. They were proven through decades of lives transformed, testimonies preserved in the ARE archives, and the enduring hope that continues to inspire seekers today. Cayce's legacy is not about him. It is about the Christ force he revealed as present and available in every soul. For those listening now, this is not just history. It is an invitation. The same Christ consciousness that healed the broken in the Great Depression, that gave courage to families during the war, that restored peace to veterans and reconciled estranged loved ones, is available to you. It is not locked away in books or reserved for saints. It is within your own soul, waiting to be awakened. Every time you choose forgiveness over resentment, service over selfishness, love over fear, you are aligning with it. And each alignment sends ripples far beyond your personal life, shaping families, communities, even nations. Cayce believed this awakening was the only hope for humanity's future. And when we look at the chaos of today's world, his words feel more prophetic than ever. The question is not whether Christ consciousness exists, it is whether we will accept the call to live it. So, what will you choose? To continue in the patterns of fear and division that have plagued humanity for centuries? Or to awaken the Christ within you and become part of the transformation Cayce foresaw? This is not about religion, dogma, or labels. It is about aligning your soul with the highest vibration of love. The same love that guided Jesus. The same love Cayce pointed to in his most impactful readings. And once you taste it, everything changes. Your health, your relationships, your sense of purpose, your very vision of what life is meant to be. This is the promise of Christ consciousness, that no matter how dark the times, the light within is stronger. And when enough of us awaken to it, the world itself will be reborn. If this message touched your heart, if Cayce's vision resonates with something deep within you, then I invite you to take the next step. Reflect on how you can bring this consciousness into your daily life. And if you want to continue uncovering these hidden truths and exploring the wisdom that Cayce left for us, make sure to subscribe to this channel, activate the notification bell, and share this video with others who are searching for meaning. Together, as a community, we can awaken more souls to the Christ within and carry forward the mission that Cayce dedicated his life to. The transformation begins with one decision, one moment, one soul at a time, and it begins with you.
According to Edgar Cayce, every human being walks through life attached by a mysterious and sacred bond, the silver cord. Invisible to the eye, yet powerful enough to determine the moment when the soul leaves the body, this cord is described in the Bible and confirmed in Cayce's readings as the very thread that sustains our earthly existence. Without it, breath ceases, the body falls, and the spirit begins its journey to another dimension. Think about this for a moment. If your soul is held here by a divine cord, what does that say about the purpose of your life, your faith, and your destiny beyond death? This is not a metaphor, it is a revelation that challenges both science and religion, and it forces us to look at life not as random but as divinely ordered. I want you to stay with me until the end of this video, because the details Cayce uncovered about the silver cord may completely change how you understand your existence. And I want you to interact. Write in the comments what you believe about the soul's bond with the body, and I will personally mark every comment with a heart to show that your voice is valued here. Edgar Cayce spoke of mysteries that connect the physical and the spiritual in ways most people never dare to imagine. Among his many revelations, one stands out as both haunting and deeply comforting: the existence of the silver cord. He described it as the vital link that keeps the soul tied to the body, a cord of light and energy that remains intact as long as our earthly journey continues. When this cord is broken, the body ceases to function, and the soul is released to begin its passage into the afterlife. This was not speculation or fantasy, but part of his documented readings. where he consistently affirmed that life is not confined to flesh and bones, but is held together by spiritual laws far greater than what science can measure. The Bible itself, in the book of Ecclesiastes, mentions this mysterious cord, declaring that when the silver cord is loosed, the spirit returns to God who gave it. Cayce's insights did not invent this idea, but expanded on it, showing how it works as a divine bridge between two worlds. Think about what this means for a moment. Every breath you take, every heartbeat, every second of consciousness is not just a function of biology, but of spirit. The silver cord is the divine tether that ensures your soul can inhabit your body, giving you the chance to grow, learn, love, and evolve in this physical dimension. Cayce explained that this connection reflects God's mercy, because the human soul is eternal, and without this binding cord, we would drift away from the lessons of earthly life before our time. He described how, in moments close to death, some people might feel or even perceive this cord, often during near-death experiences, where the sensation of floating above the body is accompanied by a line of light, still holding the spirit to the flesh. Such moments are not delusions of the brain, but glimpses of spiritual reality, where the soul almost departs yet remains connected because the cord has not yet been severed. Cayce emphasized that this knowledge should not fill us with fear, but with reverence. If the silver cord truly exists, and his readings affirm that it does, then life is much more than the years we count. It is a sacred opportunity, a temporary stage in which our soul is tested, refined, and prepared for higher dimensions. The cord is a reminder that the body is not the true self, but a vessel sustained by divine design. Imagine the implications of this. When you sleep at night and dream, Cayce explained that your spirit can partially leave the body, traveling through planes of consciousness, yet it always remains connected by this cord, ensuring your return upon awakening. That explains why dreams can sometimes feel more real than waking life, because your soul has truly touched another realm. But the cord pulls you back to fulfill your duties here. The mystery deepens when we consider death itself. According to Cayce, death is not an end, but the moment when the silver cord is finally released. He described it as a peaceful separation, though it can be resisted if a soul clings to the material world. This is why he urged people to live with faith, kindness, and spiritual awareness, so that when the time comes, the release of the cord is experienced not as terror, but as liberation. He warned that those who live in selfishness, cruelty, or denial of the spirit may face confusion as the cord loosens, struggling to accept the passage. But those who prepare their souls with prayer, meditation, and service will find that the breaking of the cord is like stepping into a greater light, embraced by divine love. For Cayce, the silver cord symbolized the continuity of consciousness. He explained that even while alive, we are never fully bound to this earth. Part of us is always connected to God, and the cord is that lifeline. In his readings, he compared it to an umbilical cord for the soul, drawing spiritual nourishment from the divine source. Just as a child in the womb cannot survive without the cord that ties it to the mother, so too the human soul cannot live in the body without the silver cord. And when the time of birth into the spiritual world arrives, that cord is severed, allowing the soul to live in a higher dimension. This profound analogy shows that death, far from being destruction, is another kind of birth, the moment when we are finally delivered into eternity. Cayce's descriptions resonate deeply with ancient traditions as well. In various mystical teachings, the idea of a luminous cord has appeared, sometimes called the thread of life, sometimes the bridge of light. What made Cayce unique is that his accounts came not from philosophy or speculation, but from trance states in which he provided practical and spiritual guidance to people who sought his help. He never used these revelations to inspire fear, but to encourage people to live with greater purpose. The silver cord to him was proof that our lives are safeguarded by God, and that our souls are meant for more than just survival. He urged his followers to understand this truth, so they would live each day with the awareness that their actions and choices echo into eternity. Cayce also connected the silver cord to the process of out-of-body experiences, which many people reported long before modern science began to study them. He explained that during deep meditation or altered states of consciousness, the soul can rise above the body and explore higher planes. but it always remains attached through the cord until the physical life is complete. Some people who went through near-death experiences described exactly what Cayce had spoken of decades earlier. They saw themselves floating above hospital beds, watching doctors and loved ones, while a shimmering cord of light still tied them back to their body. These testimonies, though dismissed by skeptics, align with the descriptions found in his readings, reinforcing the idea that the silver cord is not myth, but spiritual reality. In these states, Cayce reminded, the cord acts as both a protection and a boundary, allowing us glimpses of eternity while still calling us back to fulfill our earthly mission. He went further by linking this mysterious bond to the universal law of cause and effect. In his readings, Cayce explained that how we live directly affects how the cord is finally released. A life lived with harmony, forgiveness, and devotion to God allows the transition to be smooth and filled with light. But a life of bitterness or hatred can weigh the soul down, creating confusion when the bond is broken. For Cayce, this was not punishment, but the natural result of spiritual laws. Just as neglecting the body brings illness, neglecting the soul brings spiritual imbalance, and that imbalance can be felt in the moment when the cord is cut. This perspective urged people to take responsibility not only for their physical health, but also for their spiritual well-being, because both are tied together through this divine link. Cayce often pointed to scripture to affirm his revelations. He highlighted Ecclesiastes 12, where the loosening of the silver cord is directly connected to the return of the spirit to God. He showed how ancient wisdom had already recognized the existence of this link and how modern life had forgotten it. By bringing attention back to this truth, Cayce's mission was to awaken faith in people's hearts. He made it clear that we are not wandering accidents of biology, but eternal beings temporarily housed in flesh, tied to heaven through this luminous cord. He urged his followers to see every act of kindness, every prayer and every choice, as part of preparing for the inevitable moment when the cord would be released. In doing so, he removed the fear of death and replaced it with a sense of purpose and hope. Another dimension of Cayce's explanation lies in how the silver cord relates to dreams. He described dreams not as random images of the mind, but as real experiences of the soul on other planes of existence. The cord ensures that even as your spirit roams in dreams, learning, healing, and sometimes receiving divine messages, it will return to the body upon awakening. This is why Cayce encouraged people to record and study their dreams, because he believed they held guidance from the higher realms. In his view, the silver cord was the assurance that the journey in dreams was safe, that God had provided a tether, so that no matter how far the soul traveled in the night, it could always come back to complete its purpose in the physical world. This made dreams not just psychological events, but spiritual lessons guarded by a divine thread. This understanding of the cord also sheds light on why sudden accidents, traumas, or illnesses can feel like moments when the soul nearly departs. Cayce explained that in these moments the cord is stretched, the spirit partially leaves, and people may see visions, lights, or even deceased loved ones. But unless the cord is broken, they return. Countless testimonies of people who came back from the brink of death confirm this description. They speak of tunnels, lights, or hovering above their bodies, yet always with the sensation of being pulled back, as if by something beyond their control. Cayce's readings affirm that what pulls them back is the silver cord, the final proof that their time has not yet come. Only when God allows the cord to break does the soul truly depart into the next world. For Cayce, the silver cord was not merely a mystical curiosity, it was a reminder of responsibility. If the cord ties you here, then your time on earth is not accidental. You are here for a reason, and that reason is tied to your growth, your service to others, and your relationship with the divine. He taught that we should never take life for granted, because every day, every moment, we are connected to eternity by this fragile yet unbreakable cord. The awareness of this truth should inspire gratitude, humility, and the courage to live in alignment with God's will. To know that your life is literally hanging by a divine thread is not meant to frighten but to awaken. It is a call to live more fully, more spiritually, more faithfully. Cayce also revealed that the silver cord plays a role in how souls transition between incarnations. He explained that reincarnation is not simply a process of entering and leaving the physical, but a continuation of learning. The cord represents the law of connection, a spiritual principle that ensures no life is wasted. When the cord is severed, the soul is free to return to its true home in spirit, where it reviews its deeds, its failures, and its growth. From there, guided by divine forces, it chooses or is guided to another body, another opportunity to evolve. This cycle reflects not randomness but order, the same order symbolized by the silver cord itself. The cord shows that nothing in creation is without design, that God's will governs the beginning and the end of every life. For Cayce, the presence of the cord was proof of divine intelligence, a reminder that death itself is part of a larger plan of renewal. In describing the silver cord, Cayce emphasized that it is not visible in the ordinary sense. It cannot be measured with instruments, yet it can be perceived spiritually. Some people with heightened sensitivity, he explained, could see or sense this luminous thread, especially around those who are close to passing. It is not a physical cord, but an energy, a vibration that ties the subtle body to the physical. This idea aligns with his broader teachings on the human aura, where he described fields of energy surrounding every person, reflecting their spiritual state. The cord, then, is the central channel, the vital connection among these energies. It acts as the highway for life force, the divine spark flowing into the body. Without it, the body is like a lamp without electricity, unable to shine, unable to live. What makes Cayce's words so powerful is how they merge faith with experience. He never asked people to believe blindly. Instead, he offered insights that could be tested through observation, prayer, and inner reflection. Many who listened to his readings found confirmation in their own lives, dreams that felt too real, visions at the bedside of loved ones, near-death experiences that mirrored his descriptions. The silver cord became not just a mystical teaching, but a lens to understand human existence. By seeing life as held by this divine tether, people began to value each moment differently. Every relationship, every act of love, every challenge became part of preparing the soul for that final release. The cord turned death into a passage, not an end, and reminded believers that God's presence is continuous, even when unseen. Another fascinating point in Cayce's readings was the way the cord is linked to the mind. He explained that thoughts are not confined to the brain, but extend into the spiritual body. Through the cord, impressions, inspirations, and even divine guidance can reach us. This is why prayer and meditation, according to Cayce, have such a profound effect not only on the mind but on the body itself. When a person prays sincerely, the cord is like an open channel to the divine, strengthening the soul's connection with God. When a person fills their mind with bitterness or despair, that same channel is clouded and the cord feels strained. This does not mean it will break prematurely, but it reveals how our state of consciousness directly interacts with our life force. In this way, the cord is both a safeguard and a mirror of the soul's condition. Cayce encouraged his followers to use this knowledge not just as a source of curiosity, but as a guide for living. He often said that understanding spiritual truths is useless unless they are applied. To know that the silver cord ties your soul to your body is to know that life is sacred, fragile, and divinely protected. It should lead you to live with greater kindness, to forgive more easily, to let go of resentment, and to embrace your purpose with courage. Because one day when the cord is released, the only thing that matters is what you have done with the time God has given you. Cayce's teachings on the silver cord remind us that our choices are eternal. They echo beyond the grave, shaping not only our destiny after death but the experiences we will carry into future lives. Cayce's explanation of the silver cord also gives new meaning to the way we view suffering and illness. He pointed out that while the body may weaken, the cord remains strong until the appointed time of release. This means that no illness, no accident, no suffering has the final word unless God allows the cord to break. For those who are ill, this teaching offers comfort. Life does not end in chaos but in divine order. The moment of passing is not random, but part of a sacred design. He described how, even in the hardest moments of pain, the soul remains safe, protected by this divine tether, until its true release comes. This changes the way we view both life and death. Rather than fear, there is trust. Rather than despair, there is hope. To know that your soul is tied by the silver cord is to know that nothing happens outside of God's will. At the same time, Cayce warned that human choices influence how peacefully this transition occurs. He taught that living in harmony with spiritual principles, such as love, service, forgiveness, and prayer, makes the breaking of the cord gentle, like falling asleep and awakening in another room filled with light. But those who harden their hearts, who deny the Spirit, who live only for selfish gain, may experience confusion, fear, and resistance when the cord is finally released. This is not punishment from God, Cayce insisted, but the natural result of how the soul has aligned itself during life. Just as the cord binds us to the body, our choices bind us to certain states of consciousness. When the separation comes, we enter the world our choices have prepared for us. In this way, the silver cord is not only about death, but about life. It reminds us that our daily actions are not trivial. Every word, every thought, every deed strengthens or weakens our readiness for the inevitable moment of release. Cayce urged his listeners to live as if every day were preparation, not in fear of death but in anticipation of greater life. To know that your soul is tied by such a cord is to realize that you are never separate from the divine, that even now as you breathe and think and move, you are connected to eternity. This awareness can transform how you live, how you treat others, and how you approach challenges. It gives every moment a weight that is both sobering and inspiring. The testimony of those who stood at the edge of death and returned often echoed Cayce's insights. Many described feeling a sudden lifting, a sensation of being outside their bodies, looking down at themselves, while still feeling tied by something luminous. They spoke of hearing voices, seeing loved ones, or moving toward a light, yet being pulled back. When Cayce spoke of these experiences decades earlier, science dismissed them as hallucinations. But today, with countless accounts from around the world, many begin to see that what he described was true. The silver cord is the line between two dimensions, the final proof that our existence is not confined to flesh. When it is intact, we remain. When it is broken, we pass on. For Cayce, the silver cord was also a symbol of God's mercy. He explained that the human soul is powerful beyond measure, but in the physical world it is limited by design. The cord ensures that while we experience life in this dimension, we do not lose ourselves entirely in the material. It is both a lifeline and a boundary, keeping us anchored so that we can complete the lessons of this earthly school. Without the cord, the soul would drift too easily into other realms, neglecting the responsibilities of human existence. With it, we are forced to face the trials, the joys, and the duties that shape our growth. Cayce said this was God's way of ensuring balance, of keeping humanity grounded, while still allowing glimpses of eternity through prayer, meditation, and dreams. He also explained that the moment of death, when the silver cord breaks, is not chaotic, but profoundly organized. According to Cayce, spiritual helpers, guides, and loved ones often appear to assist the departing soul. They do not cut the cord prematurely, but they welcome the soul once it is released. This means that no one truly dies alone. Even in the silence of a hospital bed, even in the solitude of a final breath, the soul is met by light and companionship. The breaking of the cord is simply the unlocking of a door, and beyond it stands a reality more vast than anything we can imagine. Cayce wanted people to understand this, so that fear of death would not rule their lives. Instead of fear, there should be faith. Instead of despair, trust in the divine order that governs all existence. Dreams, near-death experiences, ancient scriptures, and Cayce's own readings all converge on this truth. The silver cord is real, and its reality should not only make us reflect on death, but inspire us to live better now. To know that life is literally sustained by a divine thread is to recognize how sacred every action is. It means that forgiving someone today is not just a personal choice, but preparation for eternity. It means that offering kindness, prayer, or love is not wasted but woven into the very fabric of your soul. Every time you align yourself with God's will, you prepare for the moment when the cord is released, ensuring that when it happens, You will step into light rather than darkness, peace rather than confusion. Cayce's teachings challenge us to ask hard questions. How are we living today? Are we preparing our souls for the release of the cord, or are we binding ourselves to fear, anger, and selfishness? If the cord were to break tonight, what state would we carry into eternity? These are not questions meant to scare but to awaken. They remind us that the time we have is precious, that life is a temporary gift, and that eternity awaits. By reflecting on the reality of the silver cord, we come face to face with the urgency of faith, the necessity of love, and the promise of God's eternal presence. Cayce's revelation of the silver cord ultimately leads to one conclusion: life is sacred, and death is not the end. The body may age, it may weaken, but the soul is always connected to God through this divine thread until the moment of release. When that moment comes, it is not a tragedy, but a transition. Cayce described death as a gentle movement of the soul into greater light, the same way a child leaves the womb and enters a wider world. The cord is cut, not by chance, but by divine will, and the soul awakens to a reality more real than anything experienced on earth. This truth removes the fear of death and replaces it with responsibility. How we live, how we love, and how we believe will shape the journey once the cord is released. For those still living, the knowledge of the silver cord should inspire a new way of seeing existence. It should remind us that every breath is borrowed grace, every heartbeat a gift, every day an opportunity to grow. To live aware of this cord is to live aware of eternity. Cayce urged us to use this awareness not to withdraw from life, but to embrace it more fully, to see relationships as eternal bonds, to treat others with compassion, and to cultivate faith in God. Because when the cord is released, only these things, love, faith, kindness, will matter. Wealth, power, status, and pride dissolve. The soul carries only what it has built in spirit. And so the silver cord is both mystery and invitation. It reminds us that we are more than flesh, more than temporary beings. It tells us that we are eternal, tied to God, sustained by His will, and destined to return to Him. Edgar Cayce's words echo across time, calling us to live differently, to live with reverence for the unseen, and to prepare for the moment of release. The question is not if the cord will break, but how we will be when it does. Will we be ready to step into light, or will we cling in fear? The answer depends on how we live now. If this message touched you, I invite you to take one step further. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments below. I want to hear your perspective, your faith, your questions, and I will mark every single comment with a heart to show that your voice was heard. Together, we can build a community that seeks truth, that honors God, and that lives every day aware of the sacred cord that ties us to eternity. Edgar Cayce, known as the Sleeping Prophet, revealed a vision of death that still challenges our deepest beliefs. At the center of this vision is the silver cord, a mysterious bond described in the Bible and confirmed in Cayce's readings. This invisible thread is what ties the soul to the body, sustaining life as long as it remains intact. But when it breaks, everything changes. The body falls silent, and the soul awakens to a greater reality. Cayce explained that this moment is not random, nor is it the end. It is the passage into eternity, the instant when the spirit returns to the God who gave it. Understanding this truth removes the fear of death and replaces it with awe, responsibility, and hope. What actually happens when the cord is severed? How does the soul experience the moment of departure, and what lies beyond? Stay with me until the end of this video, because what Cayce revealed may transform the way you see your own life and your own destiny. And I want to know your thoughts. Leave your comment below and I will personally mark it with a heart to show that your voice has been heard. Edgar Cayce explained that death is not the end of existence, but the beginning of a new awareness. And central to this truth is the silver cord. In his readings, he described the silver cord as the vital link that ties the soul to the body, invisible yet essential, present from the moment of birth until the moment of transition. The Bible itself mentions this mystery in Ecclesiastes, where it says that when the silver cord is loosed, the body returns to dust, and the spirit returns to God who gave it. Cayce confirmed this idea through his trance sessions, revealing that life does not end when the body ceases to function, but when the cord that sustains the union between spirit and matter is broken. The body may grow weak, the breath may falter, but as long as the silver cord remains, the soul is still tied to its earthly vessel. When it breaks, the body is left behind, and the soul awakens into a dimension more real than anything it ever experienced on earth. For Cayce, the breaking of the silver cord is not chaos but divine order. He explained that at the moment of separation, the soul experiences a lifting, a release, as if stepping out of a heavy garment. Many who have come close to death report sensations of floating above their bodies, seeing everything with clarity, yet still tied by a line of light. Cayce said these are glimpses of the silver cord in action, moments where the soul has partially withdrawn but not yet fully departed. Only when the cord is broken does death occur, and the soul is free to begin its journey beyond the physical world. This is why near-death experiences often end with people feeling pulled back. The cord was not yet severed. Death, then, is not about the body's failure, but about the moment the divine tether is released, allowing the soul to return to its origin. What happens in that instant reveals much about the life we have lived. Cayce described that when the silver cord is broken, the soul immediately encounters a review of its earthly existence, not as a punishment, but as a revelation. The soul sees clearly the impact of its choices, the love it gave, the harm it caused, and the opportunities it missed. It feels not only its own emotions, but those it created in others, seeing life through God's perspective of truth. This life review is not judgment by an external force, but the natural unveiling of spiritual law. The soul cannot hide from itself. For those who lived with love, forgiveness, and faith, this moment is filled with peace and clarity. For those who lived in selfishness or cruelty, it can be painful, because the truth becomes undeniable. Yet Cayce insisted that even in this moment, God's mercy is present. The review is meant to guide, not to condemn, and the soul is always given chances to learn and grow in the realms beyond. Cayce also explained that at the breaking of the silver cord, the soul is not left alone. Spiritual guides, loved ones who have passed before, and messengers of light appear to welcome the departing spirit. This is why so many people at the end of life report visions of family members calling them, or describe seeing radiant figures by their bedside. These are not hallucinations, Cayce said, but glimpses of the help that surrounds the soul in transition. Even those who die suddenly or in solitude are not abandoned. The spiritual world is always ready to receive and assist, because the breaking of the cord is not just the end of the body, but the beginning of a guided journey into eternity. Death, in this vision, is not a lonely fall into darkness, but a return home, a passage watched over by God and by those who love us. Cayce made it clear that the way the silver cord breaks can reflect the inner condition of the soul. For some, the separation is peaceful, almost unnoticed, like drifting from one dream into another. For others, it can be resisted, because the soul clings to unfinished attachments or fears, letting go of the material world. He explained that this resistance does not stop the process. When the time comes, the cord will break, but it can make the transition more confusing. The difference, Cayce said, lies in how the soul has lived. A life in harmony with spiritual principles creates peace at death. A life lived only for selfish desires often creates restlessness at the moment of release. Yet even then, God's mercy provides guides and opportunities to move toward the light. The cord breaking is the same for all, but the awareness that follows reflects the state of the soul. He also compared the breaking of the silver cord to birth. Just as a baby leaves the womb, sustained until that moment by the umbilical cord, the soul leaves the body at death, sustained until that moment by the silver cord. Birth seems like the end of life to the child in the womb, yet it is the beginning of a larger reality. Death is the same. When the silver cord is broken, the soul enters a dimension more vast, filled with possibilities the earthly mind cannot imagine. This comparison removes fear and brings clarity. Death is not annihilation but transition. Cayce urged people to see life not as the ultimate end, but as preparation, a time to grow in spirit so that the passage through death would be as smooth as possible. Near-death experiences provide modern confirmation of Cayce's descriptions. Many who were revived after clinical death reported seeing themselves floating above their bodies, watching doctors or family members while still tied by a luminous cord. They described moving toward light, feeling peace, and then being pulled back. Cayce explained that this happens because the silver cord had not yet been severed. It was stretched, but still intact. These accounts, recorded decades after Cayce's readings, mirror the truth he revealed. The cord is real, and life continues beyond the body. The testimony of thousands confirms what he taught long ago, that death is not the loss of self, but the release of the soul. Cayce also emphasized the importance of prayer and faith in preparing for the moment of release. He said that prayer strengthens the connection with God and helps the soul align itself with higher laws. When the silver cord breaks, a soul that has cultivated prayer and spiritual awareness feels lifted, supported, and guided. For those who never sought the spiritual life, the process may still unfold, but with less clarity and peace. Prayer, forgiveness, and service are the tools that prepare the soul to face the breaking of the cord with serenity. Cayce's message was simple but powerful. Live now with faith, so that when the cord is loosed, you step into eternity without fear. Cayce explained that when the silver cord breaks, the soul does not instantly ascend to its highest possible state. Instead, it moves into realms that correspond to the vibration it has cultivated during life. Souls filled with light, compassion, and faith are naturally drawn upward, welcomed into dimensions of peace and clarity. Souls burdened by selfishness, resentment, or disbelief may remain closer to the earthly plane, lingering in confusion until they learn to release those attachments. This is not punishment, but the natural law of spiritual resonance. Just as a magnet attracts iron, the soul is drawn to the environment that matches its inner state. The breaking of the cord simply reveals what already exists within. For Cayce, this truth carried both warning and hope. Warning because no one escapes the consequences of their own choices. Hope because every soul is given another opportunity to grow closer to God. He often described the immediate experience after the cord breaks as a panoramic review of life. In this moment, the soul sees its entire earthly journey at once. It witnesses not only what it did, but how those actions affected others. It feels the joy it gave, the pain it caused, and the consequences of its choices. Cayce emphasized that this review is not judgment from outside, but truth revealed from within. The soul cannot lie to itself in this state. Everything is seen clearly, without distortion. For those who lived with love and kindness, this moment is full of peace, as they see how their actions rippled through the lives of others. For those who lived in selfishness or cruelty, it can be painful, as they come face to face with realities they ignored. Yet even this pain has purpose, because it awakens the soul to what must be healed. Cayce also noted that the soul often sees loved ones at the moment of the cord's breaking. He explained that guides, family, and friends who have already passed frequently appear to assist with the transition. They are there to welcome the soul, to remind it that death is not abandonment but reunion. Many people at the end of life report seeing such figures, sometimes speaking to them, sometimes reaching toward them, even before the final breath is taken. Cayce taught that these experiences are real, evidence of the help that surrounds the soul when the silver cord is severed. The presence of these beings ensures that no one crosses into the next world alone. Even in sudden or violent deaths, spiritual help is present, because God's order ensures that every soul is received. For Cayce, the truth about the silver cord and death is both comforting and sobering. It is comforting because it assures us that life continues, that we are never alone, and that death is not destruction, but transformation. It is sobering because it reminds us that our lives matter deeply, and every choice shapes our eternal journey. The breaking of the cord is inevitable, but what it reveals depends on how we live now. If we fill our days with faith, love, and service, then the transition will be one of peace. If we waste our lives on selfishness and denial, then the transition will be harder, though never without the possibility of redemption. Cayce's vision of the silver cord and death calls us to live with purpose, to see life as sacred preparation for the eternity that awaits. Cayce also gave attention to why some deaths appear prolonged, while others are sudden. He explained that in certain cases, the silver cord loosens gradually, giving the soul time to prepare for departure, to reconcile with loved ones, or to release lingering attachments. This process can sometimes be seen in those who linger in illness, not because the body alone resists, but because the soul is still completing unfinished tasks. In other cases, the cord is broken quickly, as in accidents or sudden deaths, and the transition happens without preparation. Yet even in these moments, Cayce said, there is no chaos. The spiritual world is ready, guides are present, and the soul is received. What looks accidental to human eyes is still carried out under divine order. No life ends outside of God's awareness, and no soul departs without being met. He also explained that after the cord is broken, some souls remain close to the earthly plane for a time, especially if their attachments are strong. They may linger around loved ones' homes or familiar places, not yet ready to move forward. This is why Cayce encouraged prayer for the departed. Prayer, he taught, helps release the soul from earthly ties, surrounding it with light and reminding it of God's love. Families who pray with faith for their loved ones offer real spiritual support, encouraging the soul to move into higher realms. For Cayce, prayer was not symbolic. It was a powerful tool that directly affected the journey of the departed. It lifted the soul, guiding it toward peace and clarity. Another important truth Cayce revealed is that the breaking of the silver cord is not meant to be feared, but understood. Fear, he explained, causes resistance, while faith creates peace. He urged people to live with the constant awareness that life is temporary and that death is a doorway, not an end. By living with kindness, by forgiving, by practicing prayer and service, one can prepare the soul for that moment so that the transition is gentle. To ignore the spiritual life is to risk confusion at death, but to embrace it is to ensure a passage filled with light. Cayce wanted people to understand that preparing for death is not morbid, it is wise. To live each day in harmony with God is to ensure that when the silver cord breaks, the soul rises with confidence and peace. Cayce's vision of the silver cord also connects with the broader cycle of reincarnation. He explained that the breaking of the cord frees the soul to enter the spiritual world, where it reviews its life, learns from its mistakes, and prepares for future growth. In time, the soul may choose or be guided into a new incarnation, where another silver cord will tie it to a new body. The cycle repeats, not as punishment, but as opportunity, each life another chance to grow closer to God. In this way, death is not the end, but part of a much larger pattern of eternal growth. The breaking of the cord is simply the closing of one chapter and the beginning of another. This truth gave meaning to suffering, comfort to grief, and purpose to existence. Every life, Cayce said, is part of a divine plan, and every cord that breaks is guided by that same plan. Cayce taught that the greatest tragedy is not death itself, but living without preparing the soul for the moment when the silver cord breaks. He reminded us that every choice is eternal, carried beyond the grave as part of the soul's record. Wealth, possessions, and pride cannot pass through the veil, but kindness, forgiveness, faith, and service endure. This is why he urged people to make daily life sacred, to treat every encounter as an opportunity to express God's love. When the cord is broken, what we have built in spirit is all that remains. For some, that means stepping into light with joy. For others, it means facing lessons unlearned. Yet for all, the breaking of the cord is a chance to move closer to God, because the soul is never abandoned, never lost, always called to grow. He compared the cord to a divine lifeline, a spiritual channel through which the soul receives energy from God. While the body may appear to function on food and air, Cayce said, true life comes from the spirit that flows through this connection. Once the cord is released, the body no longer has purpose, but the soul continues in its eternal journey. Understanding this removes fear and replaces it with reverence. To know that we are held here by a thread of divine origin should awaken us to gratitude. Every day, every breath is proof of God's sustaining power. Cayce wanted us to see the sacredness of life in this way, so that we would not waste our time, but use it to prepare for eternity. The testimony of countless near-death experiences affirms Cayce's vision. People from all backgrounds describe similar events: leaving the body, floating above it, seeing a cord of light, encountering loved ones, feeling peace, and then being drawn back. These reports are not inventions, but confirmations of what Cayce revealed decades earlier. They show that the silver cord is real, and that death is not the end. Science struggles to explain these accounts, but Cayce provided the framework. As long as the cord is intact, life continues. When it breaks, the soul returns to its source. This truth bridges faith and experience, showing that spiritual law is not distant but part of daily reality. So what should this mean for us now? Cayce insisted that knowledge brings responsibility. If we know the silver cord will one day break, then we must decide how we will prepare. Will we cling to the material, or will we invest in the eternal? Will we live for ourselves, or will we live for God and others? These questions are urgent because the cord can break at any moment. Life is fragile, but the soul is eternal. The way we live now determines how we will step into eternity. For Cayce, the vision of the silver cord and death was never about fear. It was about awakening. It was a call to live with faith, with love, and with purpose, knowing that death is not the end but the doorway to greater life. When the silver cord finally breaks, Cayce explained, the soul awakens to its true nature. It is no longer limited by the weight of flesh or the boundaries of the senses. Consciousness expands, perception widens, and the reality of spirit becomes undeniable. The body rests, but the soul continues. Guides appear, loved ones gather, and the record of life is revealed. There is no hiding, no pretending, only truth. Yet that truth is embraced within the mercy of God, who calls every soul back to himself. The breaking of the cord is not destruction, but liberation, not an end, but a return. It is the moment when eternity becomes visible, when faith becomes sight. Cayce's vision was clear. Life is temporary, but the soul is eternal, and the cord is the divine bridge between the two. This vision carries with it both comfort and responsibility. Comfort, because no one dies alone and no one ceases to exist. Responsibility, because every choice matters. If the soul carries its record beyond death, then what we do now echoes forever. This truth should move us to live differently. It should lead us to forgive more quickly, to love more deeply, to serve more faithfully, and to walk each day with God. The breaking of the silver cord is inevitable, but how we experience it depends on how we live. Cayce wanted his listeners to understand this so that fear would be replaced with hope, and despair would be replaced with purpose. Death is certain, but so is eternal life, and the way we prepare now shapes the path ahead. So let us return to the question: what is the silver cord, and what does its breaking mean? According to Edgar Cayce, it is the sacred link that ties soul to body, the channel of life itself. When it is loosed, the soul leaves the body, begins its review, encounters its guides, and steps into eternity. This is not myth or speculation, but truth confirmed by scripture, by experience, and by Cayce's remarkable readings. To know this is to see life differently. Each moment is precious, each choice is eternal, and each day is preparation for the moment when the cord is released. If this message helped you see death and life with new eyes, take a step now. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. I will mark every comment with a heart to show you that your voice matters here, and together we will continue to uncover the eternal truths that Edgar Cayce revealed about the soul, the body, and the mysteries of God. Imagine a family losing their beloved dog after many years of faithful companionship. Through tears and silence, everyone feels an impossible void to fill. However, within a few days, one of the children dreams of him. They see him running again, happy, accompanied by a luminous presence. For many, this might seem like mere nostalgia, but according to Edgar Cayce's readings and spiritual insights, these experiences are not simple illusions. He affirmed in numerous readings that animals also possess souls, and after death they don't simply vanish into nothingness, but are protected and guided in the spiritual realm. In some cases, they even remain close to those who loved them on earth, comforting them in the first days of grief. This changes everything, because if faith assures us that love never dies, how could we think that God would abandon the beings who gave us such unconditional love? Stay with me until the end of this video, because what you're about to discover about the destiny of dog souls can transform your understanding of life and death. And I want you to participate. Write in the comments if you've ever felt the presence of your pet after their passing, and I'll mark your comment with a little heart. When Edgar Cayce spoke about animals in the spiritual plane through his psychic readings, he made it clear that they too are part of the great universal family created by God. In his extensive collection of readings, particularly those dealing with the afterlife and soul progression, scenes appear where animals are not forgotten after death, but receive shelter and care. For many, this comes as a surprise, because it was always believed that only human beings had conscious continuity in the beyond. However, Cayce affirmed that animals possess what he called the soul pattern, a divine spark in evolution that also survives the moment of departure. The difference lies in the degree of consciousness. While humans have greater moral and spiritual responsibilities, animals live under the protection of simpler, yet equally sacred laws. In the first days after their transition, many dogs remain around their guardians, perceiving the bond of love that still unites them. This phenomenon has been reported in dreams, visions, and psychic experiences, where entire families claim to have felt once again the presence of their four-legged companion. Edgar Cayce described in his readings that in the spiritual dimensions there exist realms specifically designed for animal life. There, dogs, birds, and horses that have passed on are received and cared for by souls who serve as instructors and guardians of these kingdoms. This means that death does not destroy the essence of the animal, but opens a period of adaptation in another sphere. During the first days, some remain connected to the home where they lived, drawn by the affection that still circulates between them and their human guardians. Cayce explained that love is a real energy, a bond that is not broken by the grave, and that's why animals feel and respond to that call. This point is deeply comforting, because it shows that God could not have created bonds of such intense tenderness only to erase them in an instant. Faith is strengthened when we understand that these ties are part of the divine plan of evolution, both for human beings and for all other living creatures. In some of his most moving readings, Cayce transmitted messages in which souls who had crossed over mentioned with joy reuniting with family animals in the spiritual world. These were testimonies that deeply moved people, because they revealed that dogs and cats continued to exist in some way, sharing this new stage of life. There isn't an exact detail in his readings about how many days they remain with us, but there is certainty that during an initial period they continue connected, until they are lovingly led to places of rest and learning in the spiritual plane. The purpose of those first days is transitional, both for the animal and for the family. For the guardians, it's a time when memories mix with sensations of nearness. For the animals, it's the opportunity to be sheltered without violent ruptures. That's why many report having felt their dog's presence lying at the foot of the bed, or hearing their footsteps in the house shortly after their departure. All of this was explained by Cayce within a larger framework of teaching. The universe is one, and evolution excludes no creature. In his readings on soul development, Cayce commented that animals follow a progressive path, always guided by higher intelligences that care for them. This vision completely changes the way we understand the death of our dogs. It's no longer a definitive ending, but another stage within a continuous process. When an animal dies, what occurs is a release from their physical body, similar to that of humans, though with less spiritual complexity. This release is accompanied by benevolent forces that prevent prolonged suffering. What's most striking is knowing that in many cases, the guardian's love serves as a bridge, helping the animal feel safe and at peace. Prayer, affection, and gratitude are not lost. They are energies that reach the animal's spirit and propel them forward. In readings dealing with the transition process, Cayce also described scenes where benevolent souls take care of recently departed animals. Although the primary focus was often on human reincarnation processes, the notion clearly appears that all of nature is under divine protection. Edgar Cayce explained that animals are like younger siblings in the scale of creation, and that human beings have the mission to care for and protect them. This care doesn't end at death, because the same love that accompanied them on earth projects into the spiritual world. In the first days after departure, many dogs experience a kind of affective continuity. They seek out the spaces of the home, approach the places where they used to be with their guardians, and perceive in their own way the sadness and prayers of the family. Although they don't understand everything with clarity, they feel the bond of love that unites them, and this gives them tranquility to move forward to the new stage. In various readings, Cayce was asked whether animals would reunite with their guardians in the beyond. His response was always consistent. Yes, these reunions exist, although on a different plane than human relationships. Animals have a less individualized spiritual life, but they don't cease to feel because of this. This affirmation was received with relief by thousands of people who were mourning the loss of their dogs. Knowing that their faithful companion hadn't disappeared into nothingness, but continued living under divine protection, transformed pain into hope. During the first days, according to Cayce's explanations, spirits of light allow animals to remain close to their homes so that the separation process is gentler. Then they are conducted to places of rest where they receive assistance. These places were described in Cayce's readings as organized communities, where life flows with order and harmony, and where animals fulfill a function within the spiritual balance. A moving example is found in Cayce's readings for families who had lost children, where these children appeared in the spiritual realm accompanied by their dogs. This detail impressed families deeply because it demonstrated that the bond of love extended beyond the grave. Animals, in their purity and loyalty, become symbols of continuity and hope. This doesn't mean that all animals remain indefinitely with their guardians, but that in the first moments, when pain is most intense, many of them draw near as if wishing to console. Cayce said that God would not let sincere love become eternal suffering. For this reason, he permitted these spiritual encounters as a form of comfort. This teaching generates an inevitable question. If love is eternal, won't the bond we form with animals who marked our lives also be eternal? In readings dealing with life continuation, Cayce reinforced the idea that life after death is not a human privilege, but a universal law. Animals participate in this same cycle, though in a simpler way. When a dog dies, what occurs is a passage toward a level of existence adapted to their nature. In the first days, according to what the readings relate, they are not alone. Protective spirits surround and guide them. Many guardians in their prayers ask God to care for their pet. And Cayce confirmed that these prayers were heard because divine mercy excludes no creature. Here is the key of the message. What we do with love is never lost. The affection offered to a dog, the gratitude we feel for their company, and the sincere sadness at the moment of their departure are forces that transform into spiritual bridges. Thus, the first days after the animal's death are not of solitude, but of approach and comfort. In Edgar Cayce's teachings, the idea of love as a universal language that transcends barriers appears with great force. When a dog dies, that love doesn't cease. In the first days after departure, many guardians report experiences of feeling their pet's presence, whether in dreams or in moments of prayer. Cayce confirmed that these perceptions were not imaginations, but real contacts on the spiritual plane. These brief encounters have a clear purpose: to soften the pain of separation and transmit the certainty that life continues. In his messages, Cayce always insisted that sincere prayer opens doors in the spiritual world. Therefore, when remembering a deceased dog with gratitude and tenderness, the guardian connects with them in an invisible way, and this vibration acts as a bridge between both worlds. During the first days, this connection is even more intense, because the animal's spirit is still in the process of adaptation. Cayce showed in his readings how spiritual life is dynamic and organized, and although the focus was often on humans, it's clear that animals also participate in this greater structure. He described that specialized souls work on different fronts. Some dedicate themselves to medical assistance, others to sheltering the recently departed, and there are also those who care for animals. In those first days, the main task is to ensure that the dog's spirit doesn't get lost in the confusion of release. Just as human beings need guidance when leaving the body, animals also require accompaniment, though on a different scale. Divine goodness ensures that nothing in creation is left abandoned. This vision opens the eyes of believers and provokes profound reflection. If God cares for each creature, how could we doubt that He also watches over the destiny of dogs who gave us unconditional love on earth? The impact of these teachings is reflected in the lives of those who heard them directly from Cayce's readings. People who had lost their dogs came seeking comfort, and Cayce's readings always responded with humility and tenderness, assuring that the love they had shared had not disappeared. The readings told that in the spiritual plane, animals are welcomed in institutions prepared for them, where they receive care and continue their development. For the family, this certainty changed mourning into hope. Knowing that the first days after death were not of suffering, but of divine shelter, strengthened faith and renewed confidence in God's justice. Thus, the memory of the dog went from being a cause of pain to becoming a source of spiritual inspiration, living proof that love is immortal. Another fundamental teaching transmitted by Cayce is that bonds of affection are respected by higher spirituality. The first days after a dog's death are a time when this bond manifests with intensity. The guardian feels the absence, but also experiences signs, the sensation of companionship, vivid memory, even the echo of a bark in the empty house. Although materialistic science doesn't recognize these experiences, spiritual doctrine validates them as real. Cayce said that love is the key to everything, and that God wouldn't create such profound feeling between humans and animals in vain. The first days, then, function as a transitional period in which both sides say goodbye without losing connection. With time, the dog advances in their evolutionary process, but the memory of their love remains forever engraved in the family's spiritual history. In readings about spiritual dimensions, Cayce commented that spiritual life is governed by laws of balance and justice that don't leave aside any creature. This vision allows us to understand that the first days after a dog's death form part of a loving process, not abandonment. Guardians feel an immense void, but often also perceive small signs, a comforting dream, a sensation of warmth in the place where the animal used to lie, even the impression of hearing them move in the house. Edgar Cayce never treated these experiences as fantasies. On the contrary, he recognized them as real manifestations of spiritual proximity. In his words, love is a bridge that connects dimensions, and therefore, in the initial days after departure, the dog is still near, responding to that affective bond. This understanding completely changes the way of facing grief. It's not a definitive goodbye, but a gradual farewell, in which family and animal continue linked by love and prayer. Cayce also explained that departed animals are guided by souls responsible for their collective evolution. During the first days, these protective souls closely accompany the dog, ensuring the transition is smooth. There is no eternal suffering or condemnation, because animals don't carry moral guilt like humans. What they experience is a kind of rest and welcome, in which they're allowed to be near their guardians for a time until they manage to adapt to the new plane. This teaching brings comfort because it shows that divine goodness is infinite and reaches all forms of life. For those who deeply loved their dogs, knowing they are received with tenderness in the spiritual world is confirmation that love is never lost. It's also a call to reflect. If God cares so carefully for animals, shouldn't we respect them more in our daily life? In Cayce's readings, the idea of continuity is repeated. Life doesn't stop, it only changes scenery. In the first days after death, the dog still feels connected to the physical environment, as if seeking to understand what happened. The guardians, for their part, remember them intensely, which strengthens this bond. It's a transitional period in which both worlds touch. Then, little by little, the animal is conducted to places of rest, where they continue their existence under the guidance of souls dedicated to their evolution. Cayce affirmed that these processes were natural and that no one should fear for their pet's destiny. The same love that sustained them on earth accompanies them in the beyond. This message not only alleviates pain, but strengthens faith. It makes us see that death doesn't destroy what is true, but transforms and elevates it. The impact of these teachings is so profound that many families found in them a new way to face loss. Instead of resigning themselves to emptiness, they began to cultivate gratitude for the time shared and hope for reunion. Cayce used to say that love is the footprint we leave in the hearts of those around us, and that this footprint never disappears. The first days after a dog's death are, then, an opportunity to reaffirm this truth. Love remains alive, crosses dimensions, and becomes the strongest bond between heaven and earth. Reflecting on this not only consoles, but also invites us to live more consciously, valuing each instant with the beings we love. In various readings and spiritual communications through Cayce, it's reaffirmed that divine mercy is perfect, and that all creatures are sheltered at the moment of transition. For dogs, this care manifests in the first days with special closeness toward their guardians. Many testimonies recorded by Cayce narrate that dreams in which the pet appeared were not illusions, but real visits. These encounters had a profound purpose: to alleviate anguish, reinforce the certainty that the bond continued, and prepare both animal and family for gradual separation. Cayce insisted that sincere prayer has real power. When someone prays with gratitude for their deceased dog, this vibration reaches the animal's spirit and transmits peace. Thus, the first days after death are not of abandonment, but of mutual comfort, in which guardians send love and animals respond with spiritual presence. Another powerful teaching transmitted by Cayce is that animals, like humans, follow an evolutionary plan traced by God. The difference is that they live in a state of spiritual innocence, guided by higher intelligences. The first days after death mark the beginning of this transit toward more elevated levels of existence. In this time, they're allowed to remain with their guardians, because human love acts as a balm that facilitates the transition. Later, they are conducted to spiritual communities where they receive care, companionship, and preparation for future steps in their evolution. This vision invites us to reflect on our responsibility toward them while they're on Earth. If the spiritual plane receives them with such affection, shouldn't we also treat them with more respect, dignity, and compassion in our daily life? In public readings and sessions, Cayce related cases that deeply moved audiences. People who had lost their dogs sought him with tears in their eyes, asking what had happened to their companion's soul. Cayce responded with serenity that animals didn't become extinct, but continued existing on another plane. He assured them that in the first days they still remained near, and that prayer and love were the bridge that kept them united. These responses awakened faith and renewed hope in those who suffered. Knowing that the dog hadn't disappeared into nothingness but was under God's care, transformed pain into comfort. This faith, nourished by the certainty that life continues, became a driving force to face grief with more serenity. Finally, Cayce always emphasized that true love is eternal. The first days after a dog's death are an opportunity to prove it in practice. Although physical eyes no longer see them, the heart feels them, and prayer reaches them. This is the great revelation. Spiritual life is not exclusive to human beings, but a divine gift extended to all creation. Therefore, when we remember our dog with gratitude, we are participating in this universal truth. The bonds of love we form on earth are seeds of eternity that bloom in heaven. This message, far from being a fantasy, is a call to faith and hope, reminding us that nothing done with love is ever lost. In the later years of his life, Edgar Cayce was approached countless times with questions about animal survival. His response was always coherent. God abandons none of his creatures. The first days after a dog's death are a transitional stage where divine mercy shows itself clearly. It's not a time of darkness, but of approach, spiritual companionship, and mutual comfort. Cayce pointed out that many guardians, in the midst of pain, received visits from their pets in dreams. These encounters were proof that the bond of love remained alive. Higher spirituality allows these experiences to soften departure and strengthen faith. And it's precisely in those first days when human love, expressed in sincere prayers, has the greatest effect on the animal's spirit, transmitting calm and confidence in the new path they begin. Spiritual doctrine, through Edgar Cayce's readings, teaches us that death is not the end, but a change of state. This includes animals who shared our life. The continuity of their existence is part of a greater plan of evolution. The first days are just the beginning of a journey in which they will receive care, companionship, and new opportunities. For guardians, understanding this transforms pain into hope. Knowing that the dog didn't become extinct in nothingness, but continues forward under divine protection, is a balm for the heart. This certainty awakens gratitude and reinforces faith in God's justice. It also invites us to live with more responsibility and love toward all beings, conscious that our acts have an echo in eternity. What's most moving is discovering that the bonds of love we form with our dogs are considered sacred on the spiritual plane. They don't break with death, but are elevated and strengthened. The first days after departure are a confirmation of this truth. We feel their presence, remember their gestures, perceive their affection as if they were still here. This experience is not illusion, but testimony that love is immortal. Edgar Cayce left us this legacy of hope, showing that life continues for all, even for animals. And by understanding this, the heart opens to deeper faith, capable of transforming the way we look at death and life. Therefore, if you've lost your dog and still remember them with tears, receive this message as a light. In the first days after their departure, they weren't alone. They were with you, responding to the love that united them to you. And now, they continue their path under divine protection, awaiting the moment of a greater reunion. Faith assures us that nothing of true love is lost, and that everything we gave and received is kept in eternity. Keep this hope alive, because spiritual life is more real than we imagine, and the love that unites hearts is the most powerful force in the universe. If this message touched your heart, I invite you to support this channel. Give this video a like, subscribe, and activate the bell so you don't miss new content. And share in the comments your experience or memory of your beloved dog. I'll read every comment and mark it with a little heart so you know I saw it. Your participation not only strengthens this community, but also honors the memory of those faithful companions who remain alive in God's love.